Hello and welcome to Ag PhD. I'm Brian Hefty.
And I'm Darren Hefty. We've got a fun show today. We're going to be talking about some of the problems that you can fix in your fields and how they can help you make more money. One of those challenges that we see on many farms across the country is high salt levels. If you've got a lot of salt in your soil, it's tough for crops to grow. We'll show you how to solve this on your farm.
We're also going to talk about off-target movement today, whether that's through just physical drift or volatilization. How can you reduce those issues on your farm going into this next year?
One other thing you want to eliminate from your farm is our weed of the week. We'll show you how to stop this tough weed later in the show. But first, here's our farm basics.
Farm Basics is brought to you by the Liberty Link trait and Liberty herbicide from Bayer. The most reliable weed management solution, Liberty Link and Liberty herbicide are the link to efficient row crop production and sustainable weed management.
Just the other day I was talking to a non-farmer and we were driving past a field where there was a terrace in it, and this non-farmer just asked, well, what's that and why are you farming around that whole thing? So today we wanted to talk just a little bit about what terraces are exactly, what they do, and farming on the contour versus just farming straight across the field.
Well, if all farms were flat like this one that Brian and I are in today, we wouldn't have to talk about terraces or contours. But when you have hilly ground, it does present some challenges on the farm. First of all, are the hills too steep for equipment to operate on? Now we see in different parts of the country where there are some really steep hills that farmers have adapted their practices to be able to farm on, but that's a real challenge, and farmers don't want to have equipment tip over as they're going across the side of a hill. So when we've got some real extreme hills, rather than going up and down, farmers may want to somehow level that side of the hill out and put some terraces in so they've got some little breaks going down the slope of that hill. The other thing is erosion. And when we think about steep hills, that's one of the biggest fears farmers have is, wow, if I farm up and down on this hill, that's going to allow heavy rains to just run straight down the hill and wash my crop out and wash my soil away. So for those reasons, there are a lot of different practices farmers in hilly ground will have to do.
All right, let's talk specifically about terraces. There are two main types of terraces that we have to deal with even in our own operation. It's push-up terraces, where it kind of like Darren's talking about, you flatten the ground down below it just a little bit and push a whole bunch of dirt up, and you won't be able to farm any of the backside of that terrace at all. And then there are terraces where you don't have to have that much dirt, you don't have to have that steep a slope, you're able to farm over the top of it, but you kind of farm around it. We deal with some of those as well. So I don't even know what exactly the name would be on that other than the push-up terrace, but we're dealing with both of those types of things. So the push-up terrace, you're not going to farm, definitely the back side of that, and just a regular terrace that we would have to deal with on our farm. We are going to farm both sides of that, but we're going to kind of farm around. It's going to be at an angle, and that's one of the challenges when we talk about terraces in general. So just to give you an example, some of the stuff that we're looking at on our farm, I'm going to take a couple of terraces out because years ago our grandpa, that was the only way he had to stop erosion. He had to do tillage because there was no other way to control weeds and insects. Today we can go no-till or we can go strip-till. And that dramatically reduces the amount of erosion in the field because we leave so much residue there, and so many plants, even though the plants are dead, they still have root masses, they still have stalks, they still have things to hold soil in place. So the need for terraces today isn't as much, but certainly they are still a viable practice.
One last term that you may hear when farmers are talking about farming through hilly ground is farming on the contour, and that just means going across those hills from the side rather than going straight up and down those hills. By doing so, you've got a row, like for example, many corn farmers are using 30-inch rows, so they'll have a row of corn every 30 inches. Well, imagine if you had that going straight up and down the hill. Well, you've got these 30-inch wide channels for water to run, but by going across the side of that hill, they've got a break where water is slowed down every 30 inches, and it allows, if there's any kind of washing at all, to catch every 30 inches and stop it and take a lot of the velocity out of that water running down the side of the hill. So farmers will oftentimes farm on the contour as much as they can. Now the challenge for farmers is the hills don't run nice and even across their field. So it isn't like, oh, there's one rolling hill and I can hit it at the same direction and be just perfect across the field. Those hills move up and down and side to side, and so there's some parts of the field that a farmer can do a really good job, and other parts that may be a challenge because, wow, every other hill kind of ran east to west, but this one kind of runs a little bit north to south, and it's a challenge. So oftentimes you'll see various patterns out in fields as farmers try to protect their soils and raise the best crops they can.
Well, if you want to raise the best crop you can on your farm, you're going to need to control our Weed of the Week. Can you identify this week's weed?
No matter what crop you raise, you will definitely raise your expectations for your farm at Commodity Classic, America's largest farmer-led, farmer-focused convention and trade show. Education that will change the way you think about your farm. Innovators who are changing the game in agriculture. The new ideas, equipment, and technology you won't find at your local farm show. And conversations with thousands of America's best farmers just like you. So farmer up.
Farmer up. Farmer up.
Join thousands of your fellow farmers at the 2017 Commodity Classic, March 2nd through 4th in San Antonio.
Leading the charge in strip tillage for more than a decade, the Soil Warrior brings the future to your farm today.
One of the biggest yield limiting factors on farms is even crop emergence, and only one closing wheel will get your growing season started right. Furrow Cruiser spiked closing wheels from Copperhead Ag are proven to yield better than standard rubber tire and cast iron closing wheels in all conditions. With yield gains that give you a return on investment the first season, there's no reason to run a standard closing system again. Visit copperheadag.com today to get your 2017 growing season started right.
When you think about it, productivity starts at planting. So it's time to rethink how productive your planter can be. We did with the new Case IH 2000 Series Early Riser Planter. We rethought your row unit so it's tougher, more accurate. We rethought your meter, took the most precise technology, factory installed it. We rethought every inch of the Case IH Early Riser Planter to make it the most productive planter around. And if you think about it, that's exactly what you want.
Everything in here has been exactly what they said it was going to be. I just wouldn't build anything but a Morton.
When the crew showed up, the building went up in seemed like days.
The process couldn't have been easier. There was no I'll need to get back with you. It was instantaneous.
From beginning to end, the job is well done. The building is excellent and highly recommend Morton Buildings.
Now's the time to save during Building Value Days. Find the building of your dreams at mortonbuildings.com.
If you've got some soil test results from your farm, one of the things we want you to take a look at is what is your percent sodium in the soil? What are your soluble salt levels? If you start seeing higher levels of those, like for example, we often talk about over 1% sodium, you've got a real challenge on your farm because sodium, salts, any of these things, they can be very harmful for your ground, very harmful for your crops. So you're going to want to reduce your sodium and your salt levels, but how do you do that? It's a lot easier said than done in some cases, so we want to talk today kind of through what the scenarios are, what are the things you can do to reduce those high salt levels.
So after you measure your soils to see what's out there, the next most important step is to figure out, okay, I have a salt issue. Why do I have that issue? What's going on? One of the most challenging things to solve is if it's an irrigated field and it's water quality that's leading to a salt problem. It's often said whatever your water is what your soil will become. So if you're putting high salt or high sodium water out into a field, well, eventually your soil is going to start building up those levels. And once we get high levels of especially sodium, it's really tough. That soil becomes so tight that it's tough to get things to move down through.
Okay, yeah, we'll solve that problem, but let's first talk about this irrigation thing. You have two choices. Number one, dig a new well and find better water, or two, treat that water. So when we talk about, Darren mentions this sodium thing, I don't get nearly as worried about it as Darren does. Here's the way I would look at this. If you've got a sodium or salt problem, your number one issue is drainage. You've got to fix your drainage. Now let's say that you already have some tile in your field. what are your tile spacings? If you've got very heavy ground and you have a lot of salt you're trying to get rid of, maybe you need 20 or 30 foot spacings instead of 50 or 100 foot spacings. So that's the very first thing. Then beyond that, you've got to take a look at how am I contributing to my salt problem every year. If you're putting manure on that has lots of salt, you're going to have to stop for a while. If you have irrigation water, like I said, you got to fix that problem. So those are the first two things that I'm always looking at.
The other thing is, if you do have a salt area in your field, let's just say there's a spot in your field that just turns white and virtually nothing will grow there. In our geography, the real gauge of how bad it is if kochia will still grow. If kochia will grow in there, okay, there's still hope for us. It's not too bad yet. But when kochia won't even grow, all right, we know we really got a problem. So how do we fix those issues? Well, the big thing is we have to get something growing in those areas. And many times we'll see farmers applying some sort of compost or just taking a bale of straw and putting it out there and tilling it into that ground to try to stir things up and get some level of organic matter, try to get something out there to help improve microbial life in that soil, because with high salt levels, it's very difficult for anything to live in that soil.
All right, Darren mentioned you want to get something growing. Barley is a pretty good crop. There are a number of others that can handle higher salt levels, so that's certainly something to take a look at as well.
Yeah, and it may not be your primary crop. It may be a cover crop. It may just be anything you can get growing in those areas. It's better than letting it go to weeds or having nothing out there, but you have to get it started, and it may take a few years before you're able to farm right through those areas with your regular crops.
We get a lot of questions about gypsum. A lot of people will say, oh, gypsum will solve my problem. Well, it might, but it might not. Here's what I'm getting at. If you have your drainage fixed first, okay, then we want to take a look at the soil test. And if the soil test shows, oh, we have lots of calcium and we already have lots of sulfur in the soil, adding more gypsum, which is just calcium and sulfur, isn't going to help a whole lot. But if you're low on sulfur, you're low on calcium, then absolutely gypsum can be part of the solution to this whole problem.
Well, this calcium situation is a big deal because calcium is a very large molecule. And if we're low in calcium in a soil, adding more calcium puts these large molecules out there, and then there's more pore space in between your soil particles. If there's more pore space, that allows more air, and it also allows more water to move down through the soil. And so getting the calcium out there will give us that shot at flushing some of those other negative problems out, like sodium or other salts.
But the other big reason why here is because if you have gypsum, which is calcium sulfate, you've increased the calcium level, and then the sulfate is there to bind with the sodium. So if you had sodium sulfate or really any type of salt that you can create in the soil, it's leachable. So the good news here is when you get rain, if you have more porous soil and you have good drainage with tile, you can flush those salts out over time. So our main message for you today is don't give up. Don't say, oh, there's nothing I can do about these high salt levels or these high sodium levels. I've got a sodic soil, I can't fix it. Yes, you absolutely can. It might take a little bit of time. I mean, it might be 10 or 20 years before you get it completely straightened out, but you got to get started today by improving that drainage, looking at why you've caused the problem, and let's look at other things you can add to the soil, like possibly gypsum.
Well, if you want to raise better crops, you've got to start working on some of these soil issues right away. And the other thing you have to keep your focus on is weed control. We'll show you how to stop this tough weed later in the show.
With new seed traits and chemistries entering the market, your crop protection equipment needs precision and adaptability. Hypro Innovative Spray Technologies has the products to give your applications greater accuracy, less drift, and more coverage. Hypro, right on technology, right on target.
This is the first year we planted Stein corn. We've got about 120 acres of it, about half of it's high population. The yields are definitely there, you know. And it's not just the yield, it's weed control, you know, that and it covers the ground so quickly, so there's just the erosion isn't there. I choose Stein HP corn because Stein has yield.
Corn uses 75% of its nitrogen after V10. Investing all of your nitrogen budget before the crop is planted means you can't react to the changes in nitrate levels due to mineralization, rainfall, and temperatures. Split application using the 360Y drop boosts nitrogen efficiency and often yields. In seasons with strong mineralization, you can save input costs by reducing applied N. In wet years, replace lost N and hit your yield goal. Learn more at 360yieldcenter.com.
farmer's attention to detail is what makes the difference. You take the time for service management because you know how vital it is to your operation. You service your field like everything else because soil sampling makes all the difference and gets the results you want. Download the app Soil Test Pro and start grid sampling today. Keep your farm growing strong. The more you test, the more you know.
Introducing the SoilMax ZD48, the newest addition to the SoilMax Gold Digger lineup. The first plow designed for smaller class tractors, the ZD48 has been tested on tractors weighing between 10,000 and 16,000 pounds with excellent results. Designed for row crop farms, vineyards, irrigation, and specialty crop farms. The SoilMax ZD48 will install tile up to 48 inches deep, as well as install 3 or 4-inch tile. The ZD48 truly opens up the world of tile installation to more farms than ever before.
It's easy to outsmart Mother Nature when you grow with Farmer's Edge. We install advanced on-farm weather stations across your farm. Data from these stations powers our industry-leading forecasts, along with many other Farm Command features. With field-centric intelligence, you'll know exactly how the weather is affecting your crops, helping you make informed decisions. It's another way we help you grow more precisely.
Going into 2017, there's a lot of concern around the country about spray drift and especially volatilization now that it looks like more dicamba will be sprayed, more 2,4-D will be sprayed, and we have the current products that are already on the market today. So what can you do to reduce volatility and drift? Well, that's what we're going to talk about right now.
I think the big thing, Brian, is the difference between volatility and drift. And this gets confusing for people because they say, well, dicamba has this big drift issue. Well, hold on. Drift is totally controllable. It's volatility that we're mainly worried about.
Yeah, so the separation here is when you can physically see the spray, when you're spraying, moving over to the off-target crop, that's drift. That's what we talk about with drift. With volatility, that's where it lands on the target crop or target weed, and then it picks up later and moves over to something else. That's volatility, and that's what we worry about with dicamba and with 2,4-D. Not so much with Roundup or many of the other products we use, but dicamba and 2,4-D have been notorious for volatility over the years.
So in terms of stopping drift, well, the physical drift, we can stop that with spray tips, we can stop that by making larger droplets, and we can use some additives too for drift control in the tank. That's pretty easy. Then just avoid those days where there's wind blowing towards a sensitive crop. Now, when you've got products like dicamba and 2,4-D, they're so highly active on a lot of the broadleaf weeds that we're after. That's why we're really concerned about having big droplets so we don't blow them into another field.
All right, Darren makes it sound so simple. I wish it was that easy, but here's the problem on the farm. You want to go get some spraying done, and the wind always seems to be blowing. So you've got to pick your field right, and he mentioned nozzles, and I think this is the real key. You know, we can talk about the things you can throw in the tank, the drift retardants. I'm not real big on those things. You certainly use them, they're nice tools. But I look at the sprayed nozzles, that's really the whole key. So for years we've had air induction nozzles, turbo T-jets, just things that are going to make those big droplets. And now there are even more of those types of products. I know for Darren and me, we've been doing a lot of work with Pentair with their Hypro nozzles, but that's probably the big thing. Talk to your equipment dealer, talk to your ag chem retailer, talk to your agronomist about what's the right nozzle for what I'm going to use, and you're going to have to switch back and forth because for fungicides, we want a flat fan nozzle, we want a small droplet. For something like dicamba, Roundup, 2,4-D, that's where we want that big droplet size.
Now when it comes to volatility, we're not just worried about the weather the day that you're spraying, we're worried about the weather a day or two after you're spraying as well. So if it looks like, hey, there's going to be some fog rolling in here in the mornings the next couple of days, we're worried about temperature inversions, those kinds of things. That's where we're going to say, you know, maybe we should wait until after we get through that because we don't want to have any that's going to pick up and move. And you say, oh, well, how big a deal is it? Does it pick up and move 5 feet over into the next field? No, it can pick up and move quite a ways down the road depending on how the conditions are.
Yeah, but here's the thing. I mean, if you're going to worry about that all the time, then you're probably never going to find the right day to spray. So The big thing is try to pick products that have low volatility. There are going to be some new dicambas out on the market, new 2,4-D like Enlist that'll be out on the market. So if you use those products, that's great. And also with dicamba, if you can avoid the use of ammonium sulfate, they've shown a link between ammonium sulfate and dicamba that increases volatility. So skip the ammonium sulfate, pick the products that have low volatility, and that should help quite a bit.
So keep these things in mind about volatility and drift because you will need to be out spraying for our Weed of the Week. We'll show you what it is coming up next.
The Weed of the Week is sponsored by the Enlist Weed Control System from Dow AgroSciences, a new herbicide and trait system that will build on glyphosate.
Farming isn't just in the land, it's in you. Take control of weeds like never before. Enlist builds on the Roundup Ready system, combining proven control of a new 2,4-D and glyphosate in Enlist Duo herbicide. Protect what matters without changing the way you farm. Talk to your seed or crop protection supplier today.
Our weed of the week is buffalo burr.
When we were kids, this is one of those weeds that when we're walking soybeans, I'd just walk right past it and then Brandon would be like, hey, you missed one. He'd go over to pull it and it was buffalo burr. Or I'd say, man, there's this big weed I can't pull. And my big, strong older brother would say, oh, I can pull that. Well, and then he'd get over and it's buffalo burr.
You need awfully thick gloves if you're going to pull this thing out because it has great
Maybe
big spikes on it.
Maybe a thick skull too. I don't think I'd try pulling
It's
buffalo
worse
burr.
than sandburr. I mean, it's got great big thorns to it.
Sandburr just has thorns at the top. The seeds are thorny. With buffalo burr, there's thorns all the way up that stem. And that's what makes it a challenge. And so you'll see pasture ground where literally the livestock will graze everything else and leave the buffalo burr.
All right, here's the good news though. This is just an annual weed. It's not like it's that difficult to control. Just 2,4-D at a good strong rate out in the pasture will take care of it. Certainly you can use something like Tordon if you want to, but just straight 2,4-D is fine. If you get out into crop ground, it's not a real big concern most of the time. Usually the crop will choke it out. But let's go through real quick corn, soybeans, and wheat. Let's talk about the pre's. Corn.
Well, in corn I like Verdict because you've got the sharpen in there. You can burn it off.
Beans.
Well, in beans, Verdict would be good too. Just 1 ounce of sharpen is enough to burn buffalo burr.
I'd rather use the 3 pre thing, but yeah, either way. And
that's
in
fine
wheat,
too.
You got sharpen. Okay, post-emerge in Roundup Ready crops. Roundup's fine.
Well,
Liberty is fine.
here's where dicamba is going to be such a nice option in Extend, or 2,4-D will be a nice option in Enlist. Both will be highly effective. We like Status in corn. That's even better than a straight dicamba or a straight 2,4-D.
Yep, and Husky would be the solution in wheat.
That's all the time we have for our Weed of the Week, but Iron Talk is coming up next.
There are trillions of hardworking microbes right beneath your feet. Today, Monsanto BioAg is harnessing the power of microbes, creating microscopic farmhands that help plants access nutrients, enhance root and shoot growth, and handle stressful conditions throughout the season, protecting and maximizing your yield potential. We're turning 500 trillion microbes into 500 trillion new farmhands, ready for work. Nature, it's powerful technology.
For lower costs, higher production, Mandico Agri leads with versatility unmatched. Twister is the vertical tillage unit for no-till as well as conventional tillage. Avoid costly downtime with Twister's ease of maintenance. Its unique Coulter suspension allows it to follow the contour of the field yet remain forgiving in rocks. Our hydraulically adjustable Coulter angles mean you never leave the cab, making residue management easier, more efficient. Spring or fall, the Mandico Twister is the new leader. Check with your local dealer or visit mandicoagri.com.
Leading the charge in strip tillage for more than a decade, the Soil Warrior brings the future to your farm today.
Sometimes getting the yield you want
means you need a whole new game plan. Think about it. When the older, conventional fertilizer you've been using goes head-to-head with tough soil conditions, they can get all tied up before they ever have a chance to score. That's when it's time to regroup. Time to send in the A-Team. AgroLiquid isn't like other fertilizers. They're nutrient-balanced products stay in the soil in the right formulations in just the right amounts. And because of AgroLiquid's unique chelation technology, you wind up using less and seeing more in your yields. So you could wind up having one heck of a championship season. Make a smart start with AgroLiquid. To find the closest nutrient coach near you, visit agroliquid.com.
Everything in here has been exactly what they said it was going to be. I just wouldn't build anything but a Morton.
When the crew showed up, the building went up in seemed like days.
The process couldn't have been easier. There was no "I'll need to get back with you." It was instantaneous.
From beginning to end, the job is well done. The building is excellent and highly recommend Morton Buildings.
Now's the time to save during Building Value Days. Find the building of your dreams at mortonbuildings.com.
Iron Talk is brought to you by Case IH.
The AFS Connect Farm Management System from Case IH connects you, and only you, to the information you need most from your equipment, from anywhere, at any time. AFS Connect, only from Case IH.
If you're fired up for lowering your fertilizer investment but don't have great data to base your decisions on, spring soil sampling is a must. There are a couple considerations you need to keep in mind, though, before you start. We'll discuss that in today's Iron Talk. Soil sampling is pretty straightforward, especially with helpful tools like the Ag PhD soil test app at your disposal. Just set up your account, pick the fields online, then head to the field and get the samples pulled. However, if your soil is just thawing out, you need to be prepared. You can pull samples from frozen ground, but that takes more work. Let's start with the assumption that your ground is thawed, but may be a little bit wet or sticky. The best ideas I've heard about dealing with that situation are to A, bring along a pail of water so you can dip the probe in and wash it off as needed. B, which is most commonly what I do, use WD-40 and spray your probe as often as needed to keep soil from sticking. With this, you need to use the name brand WD-40 as it doesn't mess up the results on your soil test. The third option would be to utilize a wood dowel to push the soil out of the probe if you're having trouble. This is another option that I use on a regular basis. Even if the sample is just a little bit on the wet side, you really don't need to dry it before sending it in to most labs. Just use the sample bags provided by your soils lab of choice and send them in immediately to avoid mold developing in the bags. Be prepared before you head to the field this spring, and spring soil sampling should go smoothly. That's all for today's Iron Talk, and now back to the show.
Closed captioning for Ag PhD is sponsored by Norwood Sales.
On your farm, you need speed and year-round effectiveness in your tillage program. The Quick Till from Norwood Sales allows you to move quickly through your fields, maximizing time and improving yield. Constructed of heavy-duty materials, the Quick Till is ideal for both spring and fall applications, from preparing a healthy seedbed early in the season to breaking up corn residue after harvest. For more information about how a Quick Till can improve fields on your farm, call Norwood Sales today.
Well, that's our time for today, but before we go, we want to invite you to tune in to the Ag PhD radio show. You'll find us each weekday on Sirius XM Channel 147 at 2 p.m. Central.
And don't miss the next Ag PhD TV show. We'll have another Weed of the Week, Farm Basics, Iron Talk, and a whole lot more. I'm Darren Hefty.
And I'm Brian Hefty. Thanks for watching Ag PhD.
Did you realize that a healthy soil only contains about 50% dirt? In order for the soil microbes and plants to work together properly, soil should contain 25% air and 25% water. Today's farming practices are designed around maintaining that healthy balance. To learn more, visit the Responsible Nutrient Management Foundation at rnmf.org.